Welcome to Real Filmmaking. My name is Corey, and I'm super excited for today's episode. I'm going to be doing a behind-the-scenes video about my recently released short film here on the channel called Penance. If you haven't seen it, you can go check it out, come back here, but I'm going to be breaking down everything with it, talking through the different stuff of like pre-production and shooting it, post-production. And so I hope this video is enjoyable, but also I hope this video, for those of you watching who want to make a short film, I hope this video can be informative and give you a look inside the process of how to do that. So the idea for Penance came when I was thinking about my vacation this past summer. So this past summer, I traveled a little bit. I got to see some friends and family, and some of my friends where I used to live are really into like the creative process. Like I podcast with them. I made some other short films, different projects like that. And so I was thinking, I really want to do something creative like that. I love making films, and I came up with this idea for Penance. And a lot of that came from the concept of like resource filmmaking. And so what I mean by that is resource filmmaking kind of informs like how you write your scripts and like your story. And you're thinking of like, what can I do for the limited resources I have available to me? So in this case, no money. So it's like, it's so low budget, it's no budget. So no money, places that I can freely shoot whenever I want to. So this tends to be parks, maybe houses that you have access to. So with that in mind, it kind of narrowed down some of the ideas I had, and I was like, okay, what about somebody who's stranded out in the desert and they're trying to get someplace? And so that started the story idea turning of like, okay, they're trying to get someplace, but why are they trying to get someplace? And what could we do to make that interesting? And so this landed me in thinking like, okay, this lends itself well to like a Western. Maybe it's a cowboy out there doing something, you know, maybe he's being chased by some people. And so then all of a sudden the images kind of start to run into your mind and the story can really be crafted. And so in pre-production, you want to spend a good time once you kind of have your idea, really like working out the script. I went through, I think 2 or 3 drafts of the script. I bounced them back and forth between Mike, and that was really helpful to nail the tone that we wanted to get and to flesh out the characters between us. I think as a writer, director, as you're putting the film together, the more you can understand the characters that you're writing, I think that's going to help come across to the audience. So once you have a good script done, the next thing in pre-production that you really need to look at is doing storyboards or a shot list. So for me personally, for this one, I did a storyboard because there was a lot of pictures I was getting in my head, and I wanted to be able to translate stuff from my storyboards, my well drawn storyboards. I'm just kidding. I am not gifted artistically, not in drawings or anything like that. But I wanted to translate stuff from my storyboards into specific shots that I wanted to make sure to get. And storyboards are really important for that reason. As all these different ideas and images are coming into your head, you want to be able to lay those out and to say visually, does this make sense? And in filmmaking, you know, visuals are so important in the storytelling. And so you want to make sure like the composition of your images, what you're trying to do, they make sense and really help support the story that's being told. So with Penance, I had spent so much time with my storyboards and thinking through how I wanted the shots to look. I decided not to make a shot list. Again, everyone will have different preferences, maybe what they like more, if they prefer one over the other. So I had spent so much time with the storyboards that I felt pretty comfortable knowing the type of feel I wanted for this short film, even if I didn't get exactly each one of these shots. I knew the specific couple shots that I'm like, I have to get that one. I've pictured it. I can see how it's going to translate to the film. And, you know, I kind of left the rest to, you know, what's going to happen in the moment as I'm filming. Again, everyone kind of has a different philosophy, but for this short film, that's kind of how I wanted to approach it. So now I want to talk about the gear that I used for this short film. Again, gear is always fun to look at. Story, honestly, is the most important thing, but gear is great too. We all love talking about gear. So for this short film, I shot using the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. It's a camera I got a couple months ago, and I've used it on a few projects like interviews and stuff like that, but I hadn't really like given it its like debut for narrative filmmaking. And so like I said in one of my other videos, I think short films can be a really good place to practice and test different things. And so this was its first outing for narrative filmmaking. And my 2 cents about this camera so far It's got a great image. I love the flexibility in post-production shooting raw, and I think it's got a great little sensor. Next, I want to talk about audio. Audio is honestly even more important than video. If people can't hear what is going on in your film, it doesn't matter how good it looks. People will not be able to track with it. They won't be able to understand who your characters are. They won't be able to get the emotional impact that you're trying to land with your film. So you have to have good audio. So the audio for this film, I ran a Rode Video Mic Pro, which I'm actually using to record audio of myself right now. I ran that on top of the camera, ran it into the camera, with the camera's preamps. And for a lot of the dialogue in this film, the shots, the way that I laid them out, I designed it so I would be fairly close to them, in tighter shots. And so that was able to help me pick up a lot of that audio. And for the times that I wasn't close, I used a Zoom H4n field recorder. This thing is great. I've used it on a number of projects. I'd highly recommend their products, but you can run XLRs into here. It's got onboard microphones. And so a lot of the times, if I didn't want to use the mic on the camera, I would just get this close to my actors, a little bit out of frame, and that would get me all of my dialogue. And then for all the rest of the stuff, I added it post-production. So footsteps, wind, falling sounds, all that sort of stuff, that's added post-production. When you're doing it as a solo shooter, anything you can do to make stuff easier for yourself. Next, talking lenses. What did I use to shoot with? So we shot outside, shooting literally high noon. I know it feels like it's the Wild West, but literally we were shooting outside when the sun was straight above us. And that worked for some of the aesthetic. Again, resource filmmaking, thinking what you have, but it was super harsh. So I had to have an ND filter. I had a variable ND filter that I use. Yeah, it's from K&F Concept. It's fairly cheap in the price range, but it did a really good job. Any of the color casting problems I had, I could fix in post-production. And the lens I used for this was the Lumix 14-42, a fairly cheap lens. So I knew I wanted to shoot this film handheld. I didn't want to be on a tripod. We had to move quickly. I wanted to keep my rig fairly small. So I decided to go with the Lumix 14-42 millimeter. It is a fairly inexpensive kit lens, and honestly I think it did a really good job. It's got image stabilization, and it's a native micro four thirds lens, so you can use that image stabilization, and honestly it saved my butt a lot in some of the shots where it just kind of evens out a little bit more of that handshake. And again, I was using a top handle and a side handle for my rig, but this came in very clutch. So in terms of filming, some tips I will give in the field when you are there, it's you have your shot list or you have your storyboard, you've internalized that, but while you're shooting, while you're in the field, don't be afraid to be flexible. Don't be afraid to call an audible. And so what I mean by that is you might get to your location and something might be different than you pictured. In this case for Penance, I was shooting in a lot of places that I just had either never been or I hadn't been there in a while because I used to live in this town. And so there was a lot of stuff that I was having to imagine the storyboards in my head, but I knew I wasn't fully locked into those spatially, how I envisioned them, because I knew it was going to be different when I got there. So that's where having those storyboards prepared, where you can think through at least the composition of the image, and then when you can translate that into real life, even if the location is different, you feel pretty prepared if you have to change or do something in the moment that's different than what you planned. All right, I'm gonna be real with y'all right now. I literally thought I deleted my short film. I was trying to pull it up so I could show you, talk about the post-production, and I had a mini heart attack. I was like, oh crap, I deleted it. I did not though. So I'm here with the project, it's not deleted, but the big thing I want to tell you about post-production is it's a marathon. You have to pace yourself. I think I ended up having 5 or 6 different cuts of Penance before I actually locked in my final version of it. And even the last week I was working on this, there was elements that weren't added until almost the very end, like the voiceover that you hear at the beginning and the end. That wasn't added until this last week before we released the short film. It just felt like it needed something else. So it's okay. Like I said, post-production is not a sprint. It's a marathon. You want to sit with it. You want to think about it. After I would edit and make another cut, I would need to step away and basically kind of like clear my mind because I've lived with the film so much. I did a couple test screenings for friends. I think that can be really helpful to show it to someone who has no context, because you've been breathing this short film for so long. You just need a fresh pair of eyes. You need like an audience experience to see how they're seeing it, and to see like where are the things that make sense, where are the things that don't make sense. A lot of the stuff that I ended up changing for the short film was because some of the audience feedback that I got from people, like really trying to delineate, it's like these are flashback sequences, so even going and adding sound effects, giving a little bit more context to what was going on, where the flashbacks happened in the short film. So there's a lot of different things that in my mind I don't think I would have been able to catch if it had not been for someone giving me that feedback. The final thing I will say about the post-production phase is, at the end of the day, it's your film. You make the call. You want your film to be your film. You want it to have your voice. And so if there's things that, if people give you feedback where it's more maybe subjective and they're like, oh, I see what you did there, maybe I would have done it differently. If it's not like a major thing where like the story is incoherent and the story doesn't make sense, if it's you're going for a certain tone, if it's the way that you color grade your footage, you want it to look a certain way, at the end of the day, let your voice be your voice. You're the director, it's your film, it's your idea. And you want to commit to those things as a director, fully embracing, fully committing to the idea of a story, of who the characters are, of the look, of the whole design, the feel, the tone of the short film. I think that is so important for making a movie. 6 months to a year down the road, you're like, I really love that film. I would have done some things differently, but I was all in on the choices that I made there. It wasn't a half-hearted like, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do this. You loved everything that you did about the film, and that's the best place to be with a short film. You can walk away feeling proud about what you did. Well, there you go. There's a little bit of the behind the scenes of Penance, just showing kind of from pre-production to all the way up to doing the post-production. So again, I hope this video can serve as an encouragement or even a template for you to get out there and start making those ideas you have in your mind into movies. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to Real Filmmaking for more content about filmmaking, camera gear, creative stuff, all that coming on a weekly basis. And until next time, keep making movies and watching movies, and I'll see you in Real Filmmaking.